Welcome back. Now comes a really exciting event. Okay, I kind of say that every event, but now for real. Let's take the following example. We start planning on Wednesday what we are going to do on Saturday night. On the spur of the moment, we think we might go to a restaurant for dinner and then to the theater. To make sure everything works out, we book a table and tickets for the theater now. On Friday evening, we'll think again if we really want to do this or sit lazily in front of the TV again. If we decide to watch TV, we still have to do something. We have the table reservation and the tickets. And this is where another BPMN event comes into play, the compensation event. A compensation event is a special event that is used to compensate or undo a previously executed activity when certain conditions are met. It is particularly useful in business processes where actions need to be undone or corrected under certain circumstances. Another example is an order process. Suppose a customer orders a product online. However, after placing the order, the customer decides to cancel the order. In this case, a compensation event could be triggered to undo the steps that have already been initiated, such as stock removal or payment processing. Compensation events can be divided into two main types of events. First, the throwing compensation event. This is an event that is explicitly placed in the process model to trigger compensation. It can be placed at various points in the process to indicate where and when compensation should take place for one or more activities, either as an intermediate in the process itself or as a compensation end event. Second, as a boundary compensation event. This event is attached directly to an activity and is triggered to compensate specific actions of the activity. As always, these can only be modeled as catching events because they catch the compensation thrown. So it waits for a compensation. It reacts to the throw event and starts the compensation process. As with escalations, there is no normal start event of the compensation type here. But there is an event subprocess with such a start event. In addition to the event subprocess, you can also model it in another way, which is very useful for processes that are not too complicated because it's very easy to understand. Let's take a look at our example process from earlier in its modified form. As just described, the process runs to the exclusive gateway, and there we take the no path. Here you will find a compensation end event instead of the previous end event. The event now triggers a compensation. These two activities react with their attached compensation catch events. Here I have modeled two separate compensation subprocesses that branch off from the catch events. You can see the little symbol in the lower left corner. This makes it clear that this is a compensation of the connected activities. By the way, you don't have to define this yourself. As soon as a path between the compensation event and the subprocess is established, BPMN recognizes it itself. Important, to fully model the process, it is not enough to simply attach a compensation event to an activity. You must also model how the compensation should take place, either through an activity, a subprocess, or an event subprocess. One more thing, you may have noticed that, unlike the other boundary events, there is no non-interrupting for the compensations. If so, you've been paying attention. But the compensation events in BPMN are basically designed to undo or correct certain actions after they have already been completed. The core idea behind compensation is to restore a previous state or take steps to correct it. Therefore, the concept of non-interrupting is not directly applicable in this context. So, the use of compensation events enables flexible and controlled handling of exceptions and special cases in business processes. They help to ensure that processes are robust and adaptable to unexpected changes or errors. And they add another important element to our toolbox. See you in the next chapter. Back. In this chapter, we will look directly at two new things. Firstly, a special type of subprocess, the transaction subprocess, and, with a cancel event, another event. I actually want to pack this into two lessons, but I realize that one cannot be explained without the other. But first, let's take a look at the transaction subprocess. A transaction subprocess in BPMN is a special type of embedded subprocess that is used to group several activities into one transaction. To make it clearer, imagine you're doing a big shopping trip to the supermarket. You will fill your shopping cart with various items, go to the checkout, pay for everything at once, and only then do you leave the supermarket with your purchase. The entire shopping process is a transaction that is either completed successful, so you get all the items, or may not be completed if there is a problem, so to say, an item cannot be scanned. A transaction can have the following outcomes. First, a successful transaction. If all activities within the transaction subprocess are successfully completed without being cancelled or terminated by an error, the transaction is considered successful. In this case, the process follows the outcome sequence flow from the subprocess. Second, the cancelled transaction. If a cancel end event is reached during the execution of the transaction subprocess, all executions within the transactions are terminated and removed, and a single execution remains, which is set to the cancel boundary event. This triggers compensation. Once the compensation is completed, the subprocess is exited by following the outgoing sequence flow of the cancel boundary event. We have just mentioned compensation. What exactly is it? An important aspect of transaction subprocesses is the possibility of compensation. This means that in the event of a cancellation, specific counteractions, so-called compensation activities, can be taken to reverse or correct the effect of the transaction. Transaction subprocesses therefore provide a mechanism to ensure that a group of activities is treated as a single unit that is either completed successfully or handled accordingly in the event of problems, including the possibility of compensation. With that out of the way, let's take a closer look at the cancel event. As we have already learned, cancel events can only be used within transaction subprocesses. With this event, you have the option for canceling a running transaction and undoing all operations performed up to that point. The cancel event only exists as a throw-in end event or as catch-in intermediate interrupting. As we have an aborted transaction here, a non-interrupting event makes no sense here either. So if, as in our case, the cancel end event throws an event here, this is caught by the intermediate catch as the boundary of the transaction process and directs a token out of the process. All activities within the subprocess are undone thanks to the compensation capability of the transaction process. That's a pretty cool feature. So, cancel events are a powerful tool in BPMN to ensure the integrity of transaction processes. They allow you to model complex business logic where it's important that either all steps are completed successfully or that no permanent effects are left behind in the event of an error. So much for the cancel event and the transaction subprocess. And as always, see you in the next chapter. Ciao, ciao. Welcome back. The next event we want to look at is a bit special. From my point of view, it's not really an event, but according to BPMN, it is one of them. This chapter is about the link event. Link events are actually a very practical way to make your diagrams clearer and easier to understand, especially in complex or multi-page processes. Let's take an example that doesn't come from the world of business processes to illustrate the point of this link event. Imagine you have a book with an exciting story spread over several chapters. Instead of reading all the chapters at once, which would be quite confusing, you follow the story chapter by chapter. In a similar way, link events in BPMN help you to follow the flow of a process across several chapters or pages on your diagram. A link event works like a bridge between 2 points in your process diagram. As in a normal process diagram, the starting point here is the throwing link event. But beware, it's not an end event, even it is at the end here. This is because it is not actually the end of the process, but only forms one side of our bridge. link events are always only intermediate events, as they do not represent a process endpoint. In your diagram, you mark this point with a link event, which acts as a thrown event. It's like saying, this is where this part of the story ends, remember this point. Elsewhere in your diagram or on another page, you then set the catching link event. This represents a moment when you open the book again and continue reading at the bookmark. You are signaling the story continues at this point. The two link events are marked as a pair, so with the same identifier to make it clear that they belong together. Why is this useful? If, for example, the process is too big to fit on a single page, link events allows you to split the process over several pages without readers losing track. This is also a great way to avoid confusion. For very extensive process diagrams in which sequence flows would intersect, link events can help you to maintain clarity. Instead of a spaghetti diagram where everything gets mixed up, you create clear, comprehensible paths through the process. But again, because it's so important, link events can only be used as intermediate events. They cannot mark the start or end point of a process, but are used to control the flow within the process. This is very useful for clarity, but has no influence on the content of the process as such. That was the link event, and see you in the next chapter. That's it for the events for now. And you have successfully completed another section. I hope you have seen how important these elements are for designing precise and meaningful business process models. Events are the heartbeats of a process that shape and control the flow from start to finish. They represent moments of decision, change, and action that are essential to the smooth running of our business processes. We have seen the start, intermediate, and end events each fulfill unique functions within a process. Start events set the process in motion. Intermediate events act as signposts or turning points that respond to key events or conditions, and end events mark the completion of a process. By combining these events, we can model complex business processes with clarity and precision. Use the concepts of events discussed to analyze and improve your own business processes. Experiment with different event types to see how they can influence the dynamics and efficiency of your processes. Remember that events in BPMN are a powerful tool when used correctly. I hope this section has given you a solid overview of the role and importance of events in BPMN. In the next section, we'll look at the different types of gateways, because in addition to the exclusive gateway we have already briefly discussed, there are a few other very interesting variants of this concept. See you in the next section.